need some feedback from you guys. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm a trained therapist, as Dr. Smith shared with you all. So I'm used to talking to folks one-on-one, and so if you can't hear me or I start talking lower and lower as I talk about victims, it's just because I'm used to working with them one-on-one, of which being overpowering and loud, as you need to do in a presentation like this, is a little bit more difficult for me. So I just want to applaud all of you for being here today. Human trafficking, you know, it's an issue that, as Michelle mentioned earlier, is very sensitive, but it's something that is also, you know, a hot topic these days, and something that is kind of come to the forefront, and we're learning more about, and it's in the media more often. Our Florida legislature took it very seriously during this session, gave our state attorney's offices across the state some more power in the prosecutorial arena to prosecute traffickers, and all of those things are incredibly important. However, talking about the trafficking of people, the enslavement of people, is a very difficult thing to talk about. It's a difficult thing to look at, it's a difficult thing to throw yourself into, and working with victims is not easy. And the reason I say that is, one, based on a significant amount of experience, but two, if you care about people, working with people and hearing about devastating things happening to them, it's painful. It's challenging to take a look at what their experience may be, and that's part of why folks turn a blind eye to it, or just say, I can't hear about that. I work in the child abuse arena most specifically, and I've worked in the field for 20 years. And I have, over that 20-year span of time, have watched people that I've interacted with, either socially or professionally, just not be able to handle it, or say, I can't handle that, I don't want to hear about things happening to children, I don't want to hear about bad things like that, it's just too much for them. Well, for me, I took kind of a different take on it, a different way of looking at it. I went to the Georgia Council on Child Abuse as an intern with Emory University as a senior, and they gave me a big long list of places that I could go and intern. The psychology department, strangely enough, didn't have any internship opportunities, so I went to the sociology department and made lots of friends there. But one of the things I really appreciated about them is they said, gosh, you are a student, you are somebody who cares about people, you're somebody who cares about society, you want to do something, we want to give you an opportunity to do something. I went down the list and said, okay, Georgia Council on Child Abuse, let me check these folks out, go talk to them. And not only did they open their doors to me, they also let me talk them into being the first intern there, actually seeing clients and actually seeing children, actually seeing families. And that was courageous on their part, because I think that sometimes is difficult when someone doesn't have the experience. But I had that passion, I had some experience with child abuse in my own history. But I also looked at it and said, what can I do that would help? What can I do to help make sure that this doesn't happen to children in the future? And I was in a wonderful opportunity to work with families and children in their home to help parents learn how to diaper their children, how to play with their children, how to discipline their children in nonviolent kinds of ways. But I also was not afraid to talk about child abuse. I was not afraid to talk about the things that happen to children. I wasn't afraid to put my feet in their shoes. And when we talk about working with victims, and I don't care what kind of victims they are, whether they're human trafficking victims, child abuse victims of crime, it doesn't really matter. If you're willing to be courageous enough to be there with them, it's critically important, because their greatest fear sometimes is that no one's going to see them, no one's going to hear them, no one's going to help them. So as I talk a little bit about some of the cases that I've worked with, I want you to consider, if victims have the courage to deal with what they've dealt with and to heal from the tragic experience that they have, can't we be courageous enough to at least listen and learn and talk about the issues and be willing to stand with them and do things to influence others who can help them? So that's my challenge to all of you as I talk to you today. When I was working at the Corner Drug Store, which is a great agency here in the Gainesville community that worked with ungovernable, runaway, and truant youth. We talked a little bit, you heard my colleagues talk about how truant and runaway children are at highest risk for human trafficking, or at significantly high risk for human trafficking because they're vulnerable, they're out there. And it takes less than 48 hours for a child who has run away from home or run away from a caregiving situation to be invited into the commercial sex industry. Less than 48 hours. Well, and when you work in the child abuse field, you also get to learn, gosh, are we looking for these children? Are we working with these kids? What's the situation? The young woman that I worked with and her family, my introduction to human trafficking was in 1996. I was working out in Gilchrist County, and I thought it was fascinating that they would send me out there, my very first real professional job out there to work with folks, and without a lot of specific training to where I was headed and what I was doing. We didn't call human trafficking in 1996. We called it runaway kids, ungovernable kids, kids that got themselves in trouble, and we certainly used the term teen prostitution quite a bit. The girl that I met was 13 years old. My job was to work with her and her mother in their home for 12 weeks. Okay? This is a child who ran away. This is a child who did not go to school. This was a child who was very challenging for her mother to handle. I was working with them in their trailer. I was very used to doing home visitation work, which is what I did in Atlanta. And I rolled up my sleeves ready to help them on their communication. What do you guys think communication is going to do in a family where a child has run away? That sounds like a good idea, right? Increase communication between the parent and the child. I realized the longer I sat there, the very first time, that I was in over my head. This child had hooked up with an older boyfriend at the time, which ended up being her pimp, who took her down to Miami and had her working in one of the strip clubs down there. He had her down there for 8 months, which means I met her when she was 17. That means she was down there when she was 12. Okay. Had her fixed up, got her hair done, got her nails done, treated her really well in her perspective. Okay. Think about looking through the eyes of the victims. 13-year-old girl, 12-year-old girl, living in a pretty poverty-stricken environment, didn't feel like her mom really understood, didn't understand her. School was not for her. She was physically developed, and she really wanted some action. She wanted to see what the world was about, and this guy provided that for her. Took her down there. She was making between $800 and $1,300 in a week period of time at the beginning. Okay, because she was shy. She had to kind of get into the groove of it. By the end of it, she was making $800 to $900 a night. Do you guys think that the club owners knew that she was under 18? I'm kind of mixed, half and half. I have a really, really hard time thinking that they didn't know that she was underage. They may have not have known she was 12 or 13, okay, because she was developed, as I said, got her nails done, her hair done, she had makeup on. She looked older, for sure, but when you talk to her, you had any interaction with her at all, she was very immature. Okay. Over the period of time that I worked with her and her mom, she didn't fit in school anymore. Okay. She had a hard time fitting in school to begin with. Okay. She was truant from school. She didn't feel like it was for her. She didn't feel like any of the kids looked like her, acted like her. She didn't have a good social support network there. Okay. Her mom was so frustrated with her every time she was home. Everything in the house, the conflict was so high. Okay. What do you think it was like for her coming back into her community after making that kind of money